Hello, my name is Megan Singleterry, and my policy brief today will be talking about the current crisis in Venezuela and how I believe the United States should respond. I'll begin with a quick overview of my policy paper and then go into some background information about the situation in Venezuela. I will then do a quick overview of the current U.S. policy towards Venezuela and then discuss my recommendations for how we can do more there. The collapsing economy in Venezuela has led to a humanitarian crisis within the country as food and medicine become scarce. The government of Venezuela is unwilling to recognize the problems going on there and has sought to suppress opposition powers and anti-government protests, sometimes with violence, leading many to speculate that the president is seeking to become a dictator. The unrest has caused Venezuela to become a security threat to neighboring countries, especially Colombia and Brazil, as many people cross the borders regularly on a temporary and permanent basis. The main goal of the United States should be regime change in Venezuela. The administration of Nicolas Maduro has been hostile to the U.S. and our interests, so it would be in our best interest to support a new administration. We should not over-involve ourselves in the current crisis until regime change has been achieved, at which point we should be ready to support the new administration, help their country and region stabilize, and try to reestablish full diplomatic relations with Venezuela. Venezuela's economy is almost completely dependent on oil, as 95% of its exports are oil, and oil profits are used to subsidize food, medicine, and other goods for the general population. Because of the economy's overwhelming dependence on oil, any fluctuation in oil prices has a very dramatic effect on Venezuela. The extreme drop in oil prices between 2014 and 2016 has completely crashed the Venezuelan economy, which has led to massive hyperinflation and a negative GDP. Since the economy relies on oil revenue, and oil revenue allows subsidization of basic food and medication, the dramatic drop in oil prices has resulted in shortages of both of these necessities, as well as other goods. The companies that are required to sell these goods at government rates are not making profits due to the failing economy, which has led many of them to begin selling their products on the black market. Others have had to shut down their operations entirely, which contributes both to the shortages and to high unemployment rates throughout the country. The government is still handing out food rations, but people have to stand in line for hours, sometimes entire days, waiting for a very small amount of food. Malnutrition rates are rising, as are rates for maternal and infant mortality, as mothers are unable to purchase infant formula, and many are too malnourished to breastfeed their children. People who live close to the borders with Colombia and Brazil are frequently crossing borders to purchase goods, sometimes in droves, which has contributed to cross-border turbulence. President Maduro refuses to admit that there is a humanitarian crisis happening in Venezuela. He has gone further to deny the opposition the powers that they rightfully won when they gained a supermajority in elections for the Venezuelan National Assembly. In order to deny these powers, he temporarily dissolved the National Assembly and only reinstated it with limited powers after massive anti-government protests. Many feel that this is Maduro's way of trying to consolidate his power and become a dictator, and his actions have led to the continued anti-government protests throughout the country. The opposition has also reported that Maduro has sent out armed groups to suppress the anti-government protesters and that some of these groups have killed protesters in the process, which has contributed further to the opposition's belief that Maduro is trying to become a dictator. The turbulence of the protests, food and medicine shortages, and especially the failing economy is spilling over into Colombia and Brazil as thousands of people cross the border to purchase goods in these countries, and many others have chosen to permanently migrate to these countries for better job and life opportunities. In 2016 alone, an estimated 150,000 Venezuelans left because of the problems facing their country. The turbulence of migrants and refugees leaving Venezuela is especially concerning to Colombia, as they have just recently reached a peace deal that has ended their decades-long civil war. Colombia is worried that a flood of migrants and other turbulence by their neighbor could threaten the new peace deal that they have just achieved. The current policy of the United States towards Venezuela is sanctions and limited diplomacy. The U.S. has put sanctions on top officials of the Venezuelan government for their role in the illicit drug trade. Even though the U.S. is Venezuela's top trading partner, the government of Venezuela has been very hostile to U.S. interests and initiated a limited diplomatic relationship by reducing the size of our embassy in Caracas from 100 officers to 17. The sanctions, while necessary, have not done enough to further the U.S. goal of regime change, and it is difficult for us to do much with a strained relationship. We need a new approach and regional support in order to achieve a new Venezuelan government that would be friendlier to the United States. The first step that the United States should take is to enlist Colombia and Brazil to apply pressure on President Maduro to try to get him to step down. If the United States is directly involved, then it might rally anti-American sentiment and cause people to give more support to the current administration, prolonging its reign. The U.S. should also work through a neutral third party, such as the Organization of American States or the Vatican, in order to help unite and strengthen the opposition parties in Venezuela. We should channel some funding to them and give them a place to meet to discuss their objectives, ultimately allowing them to gain more power and hopefully gain more support within Venezuela. The United States should also refrain from providing any aid or otherwise helpful support to Venezuela until the current administration steps down, in order to keep pressure on the current government to fix the problems or step down. Once a new administration in Venezuela has taken power, it is critical that the United States work quickly to help this administration stabilize the country. We should start by sending humanitarian aid to help the people most affected by the current unrest. We can also support a plan to use the U.S. dollar as Venezuela's main currency, which would help to stabilize their economy and has worked in several other countries, such as Ecuador. We should also work with the new government to make a plan to lift the current sanctions on Venezuela and to fully reestablish diplomatic relations, especially by fully staffing our embassy in Caracas and their embassy here. Closer diplomatic ties would also allow both of our governments to identify and fund bilateral work programs that could give new job opportunities to Venezuelans and help lift many of them out of poverty. In conclusion, the failing economy of Venezuela has led to unrest and a humanitarian crisis within the country, and the repression of the government of Nicolas Maduro is exacerbating the problem by refusing to admit that there is a crisis, undermining the opposition that rightly won a supermajority in the National Assembly, and seeking to suppress the wishes of the anti-government protesters, oftentimes with violence. The turbulence that all of this has caused is spilling over into neighboring countries, and something does need to be done to stabilize the country and region. We in the United States, however, should not get directly involved until a new government is installed in Venezuela, but should do what we can to indirectly pressure the government and unite the opposition. Once a new administration is in place, we should be very supportive and helpful to them and ultimately work to reestablish full diplomatic relations with Venezuela. A closer relationship between Venezuela and the United States will help to stabilize the region and secure U.S. interests. Thank you so much for listening.